Hey YouTube, right here. Today I'm wanting to go ahead and talk about gaming hardware. And I'm not talking about, specific problems with consoles or anything like that. Actually, I'm going to be looking more at PC gaming because consoles, as of right now, are kind of immune to this discussion. So let's just ditch that right there. That's a completely different discussion for a completely another day. Now, when I talk to people and, they hear that I'm a gamer and all that, their first impression is, their first question, I should say, is, well, do you play on console or do you play on PC? Well, used to be, I could say both. I can still technically say both because I have my 3DS, but I'm primarily a computer gamer now. But when they hear that I'm a PC gamer, they sit there and start asking me for the specs on my PC. Well, when I give them the specs on my PC, all of a sudden they're like, oh my god, what the hell? How can you even play on that? Because the hardware works with the vast majority of games, and I still get, at the very least, 60 frames a second. I mean, yeah, I'm not playing on the ultra-high settings, and all that, but for some odd reason, they automatically assume, because I'm a person that really likes the tech field, and, I've done tech work in the past, I've built computers in the past for people. They, for some odd reason, think that I'm gonna have this, super secret government, bunker 3 miles under the ground, supercomputer. And I'm like, no, I actually have a pretty shitty computer. Why? Because I can't afford a really super expensive computer. I have other things that I have to spend my money on. If I had the money to blow on a supercomputer, then guess what? I'd still be bitching about microtransactions because now I've blown all of my money on a supercomputer. But, you get these people that are all like, well, I don't even use my computer for gaming and it's more powerful than yours. Da, 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 da. And that's when I sit there and I ask them, well, what are the specs on your computer? And they give me the specs. And they think that for some odd reason, bigger numbers mean more power, mean more efficiency, mean more capability. And I want to get this out of the way right the fuck now. In some cases, yeah, that's the way things work. But for the most part, when it comes to gaming, that's not it. Because you have to figure out what types of games you're going to be playing. Are you going to be playing really graphically intensive games, or are you going to be playing games that hit your processor like a Mack truck? Because people, for some odd reason, they hear the PU and they all of a sudden they ignore that first letter. They'll sit there and say, oh, well, I have this ultra high graphics card with this GPU and da 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 da. All right, cool. Well, what's your CPU? Well, what does that matter? So, well, if you're playing a game that is more intensive on your central processing unit, you're not going to really get any benefit from the graphics processing unit. Well, why? It's all like, why are you sitting there? Like, everyone's so intense on the graphics card. Me, I would prefer to have a better CPU than GPU. Like, if it really comes down to it, I'll go ahead and I'll get myself a mid or a high level CPU and then get myself a mid graphics card. Now, my reason for this is very simple. You can replace a graphics card. You can upgrade a graphics card pretty much at will. Graphics cards, for the most part, are universal. Now, the reason why I concentrate so hard on the CPU is because that's going to dictate what motherboard you can use. And when you decide on what motherboard, that also goes ahead and it might limit you a little bit on your graphics cards. And on top of that, you're also getting the size of your computer at that point. It's the size of your computer is going to be, for the most part, based off of the size of your motherboard. If you get a large motherboard, you're going to have a large case for your computer. So now you have a really large footprint for your computer. Are you going to probably have a lot of power behind that computer? Yeah. And then at that point, you have to worry about cooling, which adds more bulk to the computer, more components that you have to worry about. The more powerful your computer, the more cooling you need. Like me, when I eventually go through and build my next computer, it's probably going to end up being a multi-stage process. I'm probably going to end up going with the processor and a pretty decent, maybe not the most fantastic heatsink, but I'll go with a passively cooled heatsink, and then go ahead and have a bunch of fans for my system and everything, so that way everything in my system gets cooled down. And then after that, when it comes time when I really start pushing my system, I'll go ahead and for my CPU and my GPU, I'll go ahead and get a liquid cooled. But I'm one of those people, I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to video games, because when you buy a computer, yeah, you want to go a little bit overboard, so that way you go for longer without having to upgrade. Like me, the only thing I've upgraded on my PC since I bought it over 10 years ago, I upgraded the graphics card once, and it was a minor upgrade, and I upgraded the RAM. I got it to where that thing's running 8 gigs of RAM, and that's the maximum that my current system can run. It won't recognize any more than that. Like I said, it's an old system. But when I initially bought the system came with 4 gigs of RAM, which when I bought it, 4 gigs of RAM was a lot of RAM. The processor on it was one of the best processors you could get. The motherboard, haven't had any problems with it, and it has a really good transfer rate. The only thing that I can see people actively having an argument on and really having to weigh the costs and benefits is what type of hard drive you get. Now, if you get yourself a hard disk drive, then you're going to have a few problems, because the thing is now your limiting factor might actually be your hard disk drive and its spin speed. But anything, if you get a 7,000 RPM drive, you're not going to have an issue. At least in my experience. I haven't seen a game that needed to access files any faster than that. But then you have solid state drives, which solid state drives, let's be honest, for the most part for gaming, absolutely fantastic, because you get almost immediate response times. So at that point, your motherboard transfer rate becomes the issue. And a lot of people don't think of that. Like if you've got yourself a crappy motherboard with a shitty transfer rate for data, having that solid state drive is going to do jack dick for you, because you're being bottlenecked at the motherboard. If you have a game that needs a really good CPU, and you got a mid-range CPU, you can have the most powerful graphics card, you can have the best motherboard on the planet, you can have the most RAM out there, you can have all this different shit, and you're going to get bottlenecked at the CPU, and your game's going to run like shit. Same thing with games that are more heavy on the graphics card. You can have the best CPU. You can have the best motherboard for transfer rates. Down the fucking list. And you're going to get bottlenecked at the GPU. So you really have to take into consideration when you're building a computer, what are you wanting out of your system? Now, obviously, getting the best of everything is the best way to go, because then you're not really going to get bottlenecked at something until you hit technical limitations, you know, where it's all like technology just hasn't caught up yet. But usually you don't see video games with that problem unless they're just really unoptimized. Usually at that point you're playing an early access game, and you kind of expect that. I mean, hell, when ARK first came out, only people with uber computers were able to really get good frame rates on it while running the high-end graphics. Now take a look at ARK. You can run it on fairly decent graphics. All you have to do is just go in and copy, cut, paste the INI file correction, which is easy to find. Google it. And now you can actually have yourself at medium graphics, which look fucking fantastic for the game. And then, you know, you want to get rid of, you know, ground clutter and that sort of thing. I get rid of ground clutter anyway because of those little tiny dinos that come out of fucking nowhere. But, I mean, hell, I'm playing Skyrim. Now, Skyrim, you know, it's got some good graphics. Don't get me wrong, it's not, you know, the best graphics in the world or anything like that. It's an older game. But I'm playing Special Edition, which, you know, they definitely gave it a little bit of an update for graphics on that. But the thing is, I'm playing that thing on fairly high graphics, and my computer is over 10 years old. And I'm getting fantastic frame rates. Am I sitting there and recording the gameplay and putting it on to YouTube? No, I'm not. But that's because I don't have the hardware to record it, which is a completely different set of hardware, because I don't want to sit there, bog down my computer, which is already sitting there being pushed pretty much to its limit, while running a program in the background, then having to downgrade my fucking graphics, make my game look like shit, and still sacrifice sound quality and also sacrifice video quality so I can sit there and record it. Now, if I had the money, yeah, I'd go ahead, buy myself a computer that could handle it, go ahead and buy myself the recording equipment and the editing programs, everything to go ahead and make a Let's Play channel. I would love to make a Let's Play channel. That would absolutely be fantastic. I mean, if I could go ahead and do that. But the thing is there's so many Let's Play channels out there, it's not worth the risk of investment. Now, if I was one of those people that had a lot of disposable income, then yes, I would go ahead and do it. It would be worth the risk. And, you know, if it took off, then transfer over to having that be my primary way of making money. But I mean, a lot of us would absolutely love to just sit there and play video games and be ready to go. Just have that be our life. It's all like, okay, I'm going to go to work today, and we walk into our office and sit down and play video games. Stream on Twitch or something like that. But as far as Twitch is concerned, I'm having to compete with all these other guys who have better hardware, who have more experience with certain games. People who are playing Pokemon and streaming on there because they got the modded Nintendo system to go ahead and stream the stuff. I'm not able to compete with that on a monetary level. Now, some people say, oh, well, your personality is going to definitely draw in people. Yeah, but the thing is, that means I have to have the exposure to begin with. You can have all the personality in the world, because I'm a completely different person when I'm playing video games. When I'm playing video games, just think of, Michael from Rooster Teeth, Rage Quit. That's kind of the shit. I fucking lose my shit when the game does something that's absolute bullcrap. I remember when I was first playing Bloodborne, my family would sit there and watch and just laugh their asses off at how much I was fucking raging at that game. They enjoyed watching it, and my buddy was all like, you do realize you can go ahead and stream this to Twitch directly from your PlayStation, right, bro? I'm like, yeah, I do, but I don't want everyone to see how much I suck at the fucking game. He's all like, that's what people want to see. They want to see someone struggling along with it. You know, that there's definitely an audience for that, and you don't get that much anymore, because now the people that are streaming have gotten into the rhythm of video games, and so they're picking the stuff up quick, so you're not getting a whole lot of rage from it. Even with hard games like the Dark Souls series. And so, like, I may go ahead and start doing Let's Plays on YouTube and that sort of thing, like, once I end up getting to the point where I can afford to get my computer really up to speed. Which at this point, with as old as my computer is, the only things that I can really do is build a new computer. I mean, I could go ahead and upgrade the graphics, but I'm still going to have the CPU as a bottleneck. So, in all honesty, at this point, I need to buy a new computer. But you know what? 10 years, and I spent $800 on the thing. Console gamers don't get that. So, with a constant supply of new games readily available, both free-to-play and pay-to-play and subscription games, I have a wide variety of options. So I can see where people say, oh, well, PC is definitely the way to go. Whereas with consoles, you get the exclusives. That's the only thing that's keeping these consoles alive. If companies were to suddenly refuse to do exclusives for consoles, the consoles would have to rely on their in-house exclusives, and there's not enough of it to constitute the sheer amount of money that they charge for their consoles. And they would have to jack up the price of their games to make up for having to lower the price of the consoles, and it just becomes a giant shit show. So, but, and I'm not one of those people that says, oh, consoles are absolutely worthless. I'm just saying, let's be honest as to what's keeping the console alive. But when it comes to PC, for you to go ahead and have a good experience on a PC, I know people that'll sit there and play on laptops, you know, running with an onboard graphics system, which is basically the graphics system that's built into the motherboard. Every motherboard pretty much has that. And they'll go ahead and play these games and be perfectly fine. I mean, they're not sitting there and playing, you know, Crysis or anything like that on ultra settings or even at all. But, you know, they'll sit there, they'll play games like Minecraft and so on and so forth. I mean, is there some finagling that needs to be done? Yeah. I mean, if you really want the game to run smooth. But, I mean, for stuff like Terraria, you don't need a strong graphics card for that. But I just want everyone to know, when you're going ahead and you're making a PC, you actually have to plan it out. It's not one of those things that you can just slap together unless you're exceedingly experienced in building computers. Like me, I have to go through, I have to look at benchmarks, I have to look at performance ratings, I have to go ahead and do that. And I've been doing this for years. I've been doing this since I was 16. Hell, the first computer that I built was when I was 10. And I built a computer for my uncle's business, so that way I could earn some extra money. The computers that I built were the only computers that didn't burn out. Because the computers that they had bought before, which they spent more money on than on what I ended up building. I mean, hell, even including what they paid me to build it. And you know, back then, you know, there were, you know, all right, look, inflation's a thing. I'm old enough for, you know, when I talk about when I was a kid, for inflation to make a huge difference. But my uncle, he decided, you know what? I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pay you this flat rate to go ahead and do it. So he went ahead, he ended up paying me $100 per computer to go ahead and build it. Now, that may not sound like a lot. I mean, for a kid that's 10 years old, come the fuck on. But for a kid that's 10 years old, yeah, that's a lot of money. But now take into consideration inflation since back then. I'm 31 years old now. Do the math. Go ahead and take a look at how much inflation we've had since then. And compare $100 today to $100 back then. You're not going to find an equal comparison there. In fact, at that point, you're probably going to be sitting there. It would probably be, if you have $100 today, that would probably be like $50 back then. Like, I'm one of those kids that I remember when candy bars. I'm one of those guys when I was a kid. I remember when candy bars were 25 cents a piece for larger candy bars than what you get now. So let's just cut the crap there. But the thing is if there was still a market for that, where I could make a bunch of money building custom computers for people based off of what they need, I would do that in a heartbeat. Because that's something I enjoy doing. I enjoy going out, doing the research, finding the solutions, trying to get the best value for the customer while me still making money. I love doing stuff like that. Absolutely love it. And I love actually physically putting together the computer. The only part that kind of has me a little, it always has me nervous, is actually attaching the cooling system to the CPU or GPU, because you have to go ahead and you have to do the thermal paste. That terrifies me, because I know that if I screw up on that thermal paste, that computer is going to fry quick. Because I'm not used to building low-end computers that are barely going to be touched. No. I'm used to building computers that are running games at their highest graphics and really pushing that technology to its limit. And so if you've got an overheating problem, it's a problem that's going to drastically affect the lifespan of the computer. And like I said, I've had my current computer for over 10 years. Same CPU, same motherboard, same sound card. Oh wait, no, I did have to replace the sound card because the initial sound card ended up not being up to snuff. I remember I replaced that right out the gate because it had something like a $10 sound card in it, and no, I ended up putting in a $50 sound card just to get the better sound out of it, because I'm all like, you know what, sound's a big thing. Because I listened to a lot of music, I watched a lot of videos. In fact, I actually used my computer not only as a computer, but I also used it as a DVD player. I used it as a music player. I had it hooked up to pretty much every system in my house. When I ended up moving down to Sacramento, I actually found a way to wire everything to where I could go ahead and have my computer basically run everything in the house, including the heater. But the thing is when you're building your computer, the first thing that you should think of is not what is my budget going to be. That's the second thing that you need to think of. The first thing that you need to think of is, what do I want my computer to do? Then you think of your budget, and be realistic with your budget. Don't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build a government supercomputer for $500. No, because unless you're going out and stealing the parts, which I don't recommend, I don't condone, don't do it. But unless you're doing that, you're not going to be able to build it for that amount of money. Be realistic. If you're wanting a super powerful computer, you're looking at around $1,000. Like, let's be completely honest. If you want a functional computer for gaming, you can go ahead and do it for around $500 to $800, around in there. $1,000 to $1,500, you're getting a really powerful computer. If you want an uber computer, you're looking at $2,000 plus. The main costs for your system, based off of what you're doing, if you're prioritizing CPU, the main cost is going to be your motherboard, and as well as your CPU. If you're prioritizing GPU, you still need to have a good motherboard, but you also now have to look into better RAM, and you also because since RAM does back up your graphics, and you're of course going to have your graphics card be up there, but you still need to have a decent GPU. I recommend an i5 or higher. In all honesty, regardless of what case you're going with, I recommend at least an i5. An i7, you're probably not going to fully utilize unless you're, making videos and so on and so forth. But you can go with an i7 if you want. And which version of the i5 or i7, that's going to decide your motherboard. Also, don't skimp on the case. Unless you're going to go ahead and make a caseless computer, which, there's plenty of videos online that show you how to make a caseless computer. I don't personally like it because I don't like dust getting all over my shit, but some of them are actually pretty fucking cool. But just remember, if you're putting the thing into a case, make sure you have good airflow. Make sure you have optimal cooling. That is a very important thing. A lot of people don't do that. Like with the computer that I want to build, the case itself is about $120. The motherboard is $150, I believe. The graphics card is $250. Not graphics card, but the CPU is $250. The graphics card is $150. So I've managed to get a computer that I would be completely okay with, because the CPU can actually go up to an i7. It's kind of cool because the motherboard that I decided that I want can actually go ahead and take an i3, i5, or i7 of a certain type. I think it's the 51 socket. But then also you have my graphics card, which the graphics card is one of those ones, it's a budget graphics card. It's one of those ones where you get a lot of bang for your buck, but it's cheaper in price. And it's a low profile, quiet fan, pretty nice system. The motherboard can go up to 32 gigs of RAM. The hard drive in there, I would love to get a 1 terabyte hard drive, but I would be fine with a 750. But I would love to get a terabyte. So I've actually never owned a terabyte hard drive. I've actually owned multiple 500s. And then I crossfire them and what the fuck ever. Oh, RAID. But, it's just... Sorry, terminology's changed so much lately. It's not even funny. But I'm just going to tell you right now, building your own system takes research. Make sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck. The bigger numbers aren't always the best. The most expensive thing isn't always the best. I've seen some graphics cards out there that actually do better at a lower price range than the higher price range graphics cards. I have seen that happen. I've seen the same thing happen with processors. I've seen the same thing happen with motherboards. The only thing that I don't really see that happening with is with hard drives. Make sure you get a hard drive that's going to fit your needs. That's one thing that a lot of people overlook. They don't even really look at what the hard drive is. I go with Western Digital because I've never had a problem with a Western Digital drive. So take that as you will, take it with a grain of salt. But that's my personal experience. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to end the video. Everyone, have yourselves a great day. If you're building your own computer, remember, go out, do the research, put in the time. It's worth the effort, and it's going to save you money in the long run.